The following program sponsored by Adams Financial Concepts.
About Money, a different approach to investing you won't hear anywhere else. Your host, Mike Adams, is a registered investment advisor and works with investment portfolios exceeding over $100,000 in net worth, and has a proven track record of managing long-term investments surpassing the markets in the long term. The information shared on the following program is for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. And now, here's Mike.
So it is Thursday, and we're coming to you to talk about money. And if you're hearing us on Friday, it's Friday to hear about money. And if Saturday, you're hearing the program that initially aired on Thursday. All good times, all good programs. And we've got a lot to talk about today. You know, President Trump is in France. He's celebrating Bastille Day. Bastille Day is like their 4th of July. That was the day that the Bastille fell during the French Revolution. It was significant because it was the beginning of their revolution, just like we celebrate July 4th is celebrating our revolution. And he's there talking about what's going on in the world. But if you look back and look at what's going on in some of the other meetings, the G20 meeting where there were 20 nations, including the U.S., who talked about climate control, talked about defense, talked about all those issues, or the G7 where there were 7 nations talking about those same issues, or talking about when he met with NATO. There's a feeling by other world leaders that the U.S. is withdrawing from world leadership. That's for many decades. Everyone's looked to the United States, or not. Most of the world has looked to the United States for leadership. It appears that we're withdrawing from that. That could affect some investments, probably not. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that in the scope of something I've been talking about for the last 8 years. I've been talking about the super cycle, study done by Standard Chartered Bank out of the UK, large bank, 70,000 employees. They did a study looking at world GDP. And if you've heard this before, so much the better, because I talk about it about once every 3 to 4 months, every 6 months, just to keep us reminded of what the big picture is, where the picture is from mile high, what it looks like in the long term. Because sometimes we get so focused on the short term that we forget about where things are in the long term. And I think investing is a long-term game. And game is probably the wrong term to use, but it's a long-term endeavor is probably a better word to use. It is a long-term endeavor. You don't make all your money in 3 months. You don't make all your money in 3 years. It's generally a process that takes decades to build wealth. You know, Warren Buffett expressed it a certain way. He said, you can't make a baby in 1 month by getting 9 women pregnant. There's a period of time that it takes for investments to mature. So looking at the long term is something that I revisit every 3 or 4 months to keep your focus on what's going on. And the Standard Chartered study seems so appropriate, and so many people latched onto it 8 years ago, and most people have forgotten about it. But I don't want to let you ever forget about it, because it really is, for at least the next few years or next decade, really crucial to where we're going and where investments are going and where it's going to be to create wealth. So the Standard Chartered cycle looked at long periods of time in which the world GDP grew at a faster than average rate, significantly faster. And the first period was from 1870 to 1913, a period of 43 years. And that period of time came and was driven by the industrialization of the United States. Now, what happened during that time is that things began to slow down. We were an agricultural nation. But in 1874, we went through a financial crisis very similar to what we just went through in 2008, 2009. We went through a financial crisis. And instead of the government bailing us out, the government let things continue to go. We heard they used some of the same arguments in 1874 and 1876 and 1878. They used some of those same arguments that we heard in 2007 and 2008 and you hear today about not using taxpayer money to bail out long term. Now, traditionally, the central bank, the equivalent of the Federal Reserve, has always been what's called the lender of last resort. The Federal Reserve steps in and bails us out. We went through the first crisis in 1796, following the War of Independence from Britain. We had the government that bailed out. But the first Great Depression happened in 1838. We didn't have a Federal Reserve at the time. We didn't have a central bank at the time. It was the Bank of England and, to a lesser degree, the Bank of France that stepped in and bought U.S. Treasury bonds. They supplied money to the United States and to the various states around the country because we didn't have a treasury like we do today. But the Bank of England and the Bank of France stepped in and became the lender of last resort. They became like the Federal Reserve because British and French had a lot of investments in the U.S. But by 1874, things were changing. And we went through the financial crisis. And that crisis, every other year from 1870 to the 1900s, was a recessionary year. It was a very painful time. We didn't keep track of unemployment, but had we kept track of unemployment, it probably would have run around 20%. It was a very tough time, and yet through that tough time, something happened as we became an industrialized nation. And that industrialization pushed the world economy. The world grew at a faster rate because of that. Difficult time, but bad. But a positive in the long term. The second cycle happened from 1945 to 1970. And of course, the key thing about 1945 is that was the end of World War II, and it was a rebuilding of Europe. It was the decolonization, all those European countries that gave up their colonies and allowed those nations during that time period, 1945 to 1970, allowed their colonies to become independent. We rebuilt the infrastructure in the U.S. We built the interstate highway program. We built airports. It was a time in which our growth was strong and the world growth was strong. 1945 to 1970. Of course, the stock market went from 150 to over 1,000 during that time. It was a very, very strong time. And if you look at 1941, the market went from 100 to 1,000. So it was a very good time. It was also the beginning of the Cold War. But Standard Chartered said, right now, we haven't been in a world growth cycle since 1970, or a more rapid growth cycle. But in 2009, we started a growth cycle which will take us, in their estimation, to 2030 or even longer, driven primarily by the emerging nations, especially in Asia. The winners are going to be global countries: China and India and Brazil, Indonesia, Russia, Turkey, the sub-Sahara Africa. That will come with big risk, political and society. There's going to be social volatility. Just a few years ago, we went through the Asian storm, the Asian summer, Asian spring. Countries are less transparent than in the U.S., and there's going to be a greater instability, and investments are going to be more vulnerable and subject to politicians, bureaucrats. Corruption's can be epidemic. All those things are going to affect these emerging nations. there's going to be a fundamental shift in the balance of power. Every supercycle has its share of winners and losers, and we're going to see that with this coming supercycle. But there's advantages for investors as well. There's an economic momentum that's going to be going on, and there's a reason to take advantage of it because we're not at the end of the cycle. Big market gains, secular bull markets don't die from old age. They die because of other events that happen. We're not, just because we've been in this secular bull market where we went from 6,600 to a new high, doesn't mean that we're in old age and ready for a downturn. It could mean, and it probably does mean, we're just at the beginning of something that's got a lot further to run. So don't get misled by the people that sell negativity and sell fear. We're in a process where whether the United States leads or doesn't lead, nations are growing and they're going to continue to grow. Those nations that I mentioned and many more are coming of age. Their GDPs are growing faster than ours by necessity. So don't go away. We've got more to finish this, and I've got a great guest. So we've got so much more to cover today. Don't go away. I'll be right back after this commercial break.
About Money with Mike Adams will resume in a moment on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Did you know the 20-year annualized S&P return was 8.19%, while the 20-year annualized return for the average equity mutual fund investor was just 4.67%? That's a gap of 3.52%. It doesn't sound like much now, but it could mean the difference between retiring in comfort and running out of money. For some seniors, a gap that large could cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars and cut their retirement short. Don't run out of money. Call Mike Adams of Adams Financial Concepts today, 206-903-1019, and learn more about how you can, 1, create wealth for retirement, and 2, protect yourself from running out of money. Adams Financial Concepts specializes in creating and maintaining wealth. Call today, 206-903-1019, or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Risk, including loss of principal.
We're back with more About Money. For details on what you hear on today's show, visit adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Now, here again is Mike Adams.
I've been talking about the supercycle, revisiting this idea of the supercycle because I believe investing is a long-term proposition. It's something in which you have to have a long-term view to make money. You have to stay the course in the whole thing. And I believe that the world is changing. While physics or chemistry or biology have physical laws which set in motion or are fixed, like fixed in concrete, the economy doesn't have those kind of things. Things are changing, and you have to change with that as time goes along. You know, I started to talk about the first supercycle, and the first supercycle was one in which we converted from an agricultural country to an industrial country, drove the world in doing so. So let me take you back and give you some glimpse into what I'm talking about. Is if you go back to 1850, there were 23 million people in the U.S. Today we have over 300 million. But in 1850 we had 23 million, and 11 million were employed on the farms. You know, that was a significant number. Almost half the people worked on the farms. The agricultural exports were $189 million. 81% of that was, or 81% were, that represented 81% of total exports. Only 19% of everything else was industrial. 80%, over 80%. Was agricultural. Cotton alone was 124 million of that, 54% of our total exports in cotton. By 1900, we were 76 million people, 29 million farmers. Agricultural exports had grown to 917 million, but represented less than 60% of our total exports. By 2014, exports had grown 600-fold. Farm production had grown 600-fold from what we produced in 1850, and yet the number of farmers on the farms by 2014, for the first time, had dropped below 1 million. Think about it. Producing 600 times what we produced in 1850 with 10%, less than 10% of the labor force. That's productivity. Things are changing. And if you continue to see the world in terms of what was going on in 1850, you would have missed the entire industrial revolution. The same thing is going on in manufacturing today. You know, you hear people talk about manufacturing, that we've lost 8 million jobs. Since 1979, we've lost 8 million manufacturing jobs. It's not that manufacturing has been dropping down. You know, manufacturing is setting new records. If you look at where we are in manufacturing, today we're the second largest manufacturer in the world. 17 to 18% of the world's manufactured goods are manufactured in the United States. To hear politicians talk, it's like we don't have manufacturing. In fact, we are setting new records. We set a record in 2007, which it took until 2014 to surpass. 2015 we passed, 2016 we passed, and we'll set a new record in 2017. Our manufacturing is actually growing, and yet, for the same person who's employed in manufacturing, they're producing almost 5 times what they produced in terms of man hours in 1965. That's a significant change in productivity. Everyone is becoming more efficient and more effective. Jobs are changing. The world is changing. Investment opportunities are changing. And we're experiencing some of the benefits of that. Some of the benefits are there's more things to enjoy. I had dinner with a professional colleague in Chicago last week, and he mentions to me he had lived in the UK for a couple of years, and he mentioned the United States is a very special country because what seems to drive consumption is comfort. You know, if you can show somebody something that's more comfortable to do, they'll buy it. That's really, when you think about online sales, when you think about what we have going on today, that's really a very astute observation. We do move toward comfort, and what we do has been a leader place in the world, and I believe that will continue for some years. I believe that's part of what we're seeing. We're seeing service industries, more recreational opportunities, and greater things of comfort, which actually brings me to my guest today, because we are going to talk about a recreational activity. I want to welcome to the program Nick Hogue of Freedom Boat Club.
Hi,
Welcome
Mike.
to the program, Nick.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So why don't we start with your background?
Yeah, my background, I've been in boating my whole life. I grew up boating on the lakes and rivers in the Midwest, and when you're 5 years old, you don't really know the difference. And so, you know, when you're 5 years old, it might be a lake or a river, but it seemed like an ocean to a 5-year-old. I went to college on the West Coast and fell in love with the sailing and boating there too. So I've been boating my whole life. I was in the military, several trips overseas, and now I'm making my new home here in Seattle and loving every bit of it.
Awesome. So let's talk about Freedom Boat Club.
Yeah, well, like you were saying, you know, comfort is kind of where we're headed, and I would tie that to convenience as well. What Freedom Boat Club offers folks who want to get on the water is convenience. Freedom Boat Club is a way for anyone to be able to go boating without the cost, hassle, or time requirements of boat ownership. In Freedom Boat Club, we own the boats. We clean them, store them, maintain them, fix them when they break. We handle absolutely everything so the members don't have to lift a finger. In traditional boat ownership, there's a lot of work involved, especially when we're talking boating on the beautiful Puget Sound here that we all have right in our backyard. Salt water and boats don't mix, believe it or not. It requires a lot of work. And we take that work away, where our members can show up at the club and be from car and parking lot to on the Puget Sound in 5 minutes or less.
Awesome. So, Puget Sound Boat or Freedom, I'll get it right. Freedom Boat Club
Yeah.
is something here in the Puget Sound, but it's a nationwide program.
Correct. Yeah, we have 130 locations nationwide. This actually was started in 1989 in Florida. We have 130 clubs now. In the last 30 years, we've grown to that level. 2 clubs in Vancouver. And so what we do basically is we own all the boats. We do everything. And so we own all the boats so the members don't have to. And that means when you join any Freedom Boat Club, you can use all Freedom Boat Clubs nationwide.
And so 130, is there a concentration of the clubs?
I would say currently they're concentrated on the East Coast, but I'm bringing it here to Seattle to get the same job done over here.
And you have offices here in Seattle?
Yeah, we're located at Elliott Bay Marina. It's a beautiful 5-star sort of country club resort type feel. The membership includes parking passes and discounts at the restaurants and brunch at the wonderful restaurant Palisade. And we've got some beautiful boats down there and staff and dock masters ready to go. One location here at Elliott Bay Marina. We're opening Tacoma currently for an August open date in the South Sound, and then we're going to expand onto Lake Washington and in the future up north to Anacortes.
So why don't you tell us about the boats?
Sure. So all of our boats are brand new. All of our boats are $50,000 to $90,000 boats, all 19 to 25 feet. They're brand new boats. So we sell the fleet after 3 years. So when someone joins the club, they'll always be on new or like new boats. If you're a member for 10 years, you'll have seen a couple iterations or more of new boats coming into the fleet. So it's something to be said about being on a brand new boat. You know, it's one thing to be on a cheap, crappy rental boat. You take it out for a few hours on a Saturday. It's another thing to be on a beautiful, brand new boat. All of our boats have the depth sounder, fish finder, VHF radios, the GPS, all the required Coast Guard safety equipment. And they're nice, they're fun, they're new. And so these boats allow our members to get out and really just enjoy everything that boating has to offer. It's some of the best memories, certainly, that I can think of. And anyone that's into boating will tell you it beats going to the bar for the 150th time any day of the week.
So, I know some friends that are boaters, and they go through classes. They have to do all those things in order to go out. You're talking about a boat club where people don't have to go through those classes. How does that happen?
Exactly. Thanks for asking. So we provide unlimited free training with our U.S. Coast Guard certified captains. What that means is our members can reserve a boat, reserve a captain, and the captain's free of charge, 7 days a week.
So not only do you get the boat, you get the captain with it who knows all the safety.
You get the captain with it, and you can't put a price on knowledge or safety, and that's what Freedom Boat Club provides. We provide access to the fleet, unlimited convenience, no work, and as much training and boat safety knowledge that someone would want or need.
Wow. And so how far can you go with the boats?
So we have a 50-mile radius on the Puget Sound. That's all the way south of Olympia and all the way up to Deception Pass, up in the North Sound. It's about a 3.5-hour boat ride. So that's or more depending on your speed. So that's a long ways. And as we add more locations, those distances will be extended.
And there's a lot of things to see within a few hours of Seattle.
Hundreds of locations, whether it's a quick trip over to Blake Island, do the Tillicum Village excursion, or some popular locations, or Paulsbo, over to Paulsbo for lunch, or the quickest and easiest is just run over to Eagle Harbor on Bainbridge Island. There's a couple restaurants to see. There's some free moorage all over the place over there. And so what you get is you get the feeling of this offshore water, ocean type adventure. But it's really only 15 minutes away. It's pretty incredible.
Hang on, we've got more coming back right after the commercial break. Don't go away.
More About Money coming up with Mike Adams on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Creating and maintaining wealth has been the specialty of Adams Financial Concepts for over 20 years. Every portfolio managed by Adams Financial Concepts is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. The client's interest always comes first in portfolio decisions. Call Mike Adams today at 206-903-1019 or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com to check out their AFC performance. They welcome your review. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Now we return to About Money. There's more information waiting for you at adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here again is your host, Mike Adams.
So I'm here with Nick Hogue of Freedom Boat Club. Give us again the overview because we've gone through a commercial.
Sure. It's real simple on the overview. Basically, Freedom Boat Club, we've been around for 30 years. We have 130 locations nationwide. We make it possible for people who want to go boating to get out there without having to buy a boat. There's a lot of inherent cost in boat ownership with Freedom Boat Club. There's also a lot of inherent work and maintenance involved. Moorage, insurance, the whole works. We clean them, we store them, we maintain them, we fix them when they break. We handle absolutely everything so members can join the club with a small entry fee and a monthly club dues and have unlimited access to a fleet of boats nationwide year-round.
And you do the insurance as well, correct?
Yes, we provide over $1 million of insurance. We insure our members for $1 million liability and $300,000 hull and machinery. There's a couple deductibles on those policies. That's $2,500. But basically, if someone breaks a prop, the prop's $150. Replace the prop and have fun the next day. Just the cleaning and the labor and the maintenance and the mechanic work and all that stuff. It's out the window. It makes for hassle for easy boating.
So there's an old expression that a boat is a hole in the water where you pour in money.
Yes, a boat is a hole in the water. A hole in the water you throw money into. They also say boat stands for break out another 1,000.
Yeah.
Or that a boat dollar is $1,000. Boats are just expensive.
And when you think about it, most people that own a boat have the boat tied up to the dock
Right.
for 80 or 90% of the time.
Right.
It's not doing any good. It's not, 100% efficient use. You're not constantly on the...
That's exactly right. We find that boat owners go boating typically once a month. Freedom Boat Club members go boating twice a week. Even once a week. Even once every other week, you're still ahead as far as making best of use of your time and money.
So in doing this, how long can you rent the boat for? You can go just 50 miles, but most of that can be in a single day boat trip.
Absolutely. Well, 50 miles is a very long ways. 50 miles is a very, very long ways on a 22, 23-foot boat. Again, that's all the way up to Deception Pass and all the way down to Olympia. That could be a 3, 4, 5-hour boat ride. These boats can be kept out up to 4 days and 3 nights at a time. So you can do overnight trips. A 4-day trip on a boat, that's a pretty fun weekend. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty incredible week enjoying boating here in the Pacific Northwest. And so... we like to say that most people think this might be an alternative to boat ownership. I've always said from day one that this is truly an upgrade. This is better than boat ownership. Do you want to buy one piece of fiberglass that sits in the water and you use it once a month? Or do you want unlimited access to a fleet of boats where you don't have to own anything except the water? Take ownership of your time and of making best use of your money. So that's really what it is. 4 days and 3 nights at a time. It's pretty available. There's great access. We keep an 8-to-1 ratio. So for every 8 people that join, we buy a brand new boat and we add it to the fleet.
So that would mean, okay, I can't do the numbers in my head.
Yeah. Just put it this way: we have more boats than we need.
Yeah.
We always have more boats than we need to meet and exceed the demand.
Awesome. So, in the process, when you're leasing a boat, when you're renting a boat, or when you're taking a boat out, what's the exact process? What do you have to do to reserve the boat? What do you have to go through?
Sure, great question. So we have a state-of-the-art online proprietary reservation system. A member can, from the comfort of their own home, log in, select their day, select their marina, select their boat, make a reservation, and that reservation will be held for them. When the time comes for them to come use their boat, we have a tablet system. The reservation's already in the tablet. We're waiting for them. It's ready to go. We'll say, here's your boat. We've already cleaned it that morning. It's full of gas. We've already gone to the gas dock that morning and filled it all the way up to full. So the member comes on, gets on the boat, and we'll do a full checkout process. We'll go over all the required safety equipment. By the way, that's about another $1,500 just of safety equipment that's on aboard every boat that members don't have to buy. It's all included, and they just go through the safety equipment check, and they're on their way. Because we're on the Puget Sound, because we're Elliott Bay Marina, you don't have to mess with the locks. That's a lot of boating in Seattle. A lot of boating is Lake Washington, or if you want to go out and have some adventure, you're going to have to go through the lock system, which can take anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours, depending on the day and how much commercial traffic's going through, because they get priority. So with us, you could be from car pull into the parking lot to in the boat and beyond the breakwater in 5 minutes or less.
Awesome. So let's talk about the membership, the cost of membership, the cost of this whole program.
Sure. So it's really, really simple. A lot of people think that I'd probably have to pay more for the bigger boats, right? Or if I just want the 23 or 24 footers, but not the 19s, it's not the case. You don't have to pay extra to go boating in Fort Lauderdale. You don't have to pay extra to go to Vancouver. You don't have to pay extra for different boats. It's one price fits all. That's kind of how we like it. So there's a one-time entry fee. That's how we use that money to buy new boats. That one-time entry fee is $4,900. The monthly club dues is very affordable. It's less than the cost of moorage. It's only $349 a month. And then members pay for their gas.
So in what you end up with, I mean, if you own your own boat, if you bought your own $70,000 boat, then you have mortgage fees, you have gas, you have the cleaning, you have all the other things that go along with it.
Absolutely.
For here, you have a membership fee that you pay a one-time thing, and then a monthly dues.
$349 a month. That's it. Mortgage in Seattle, you're $400 minimum, unless you're going to trailer it and put it in your driveway, and that's a whole rigmarole kind of a process that we haven't even got into yet. But for listeners that have done that process, they know exactly what I'm talking about when I can say it can be a pain. Mortgage is $400 a month minimum. Likely it'll be up in the $500, $600, $700 a month for regular mortgage. $100 for sure for insurance a month. $400 a month for sure on the boat payment, unless you're paying $70,000 cash. You're going to have a down payment on that boat anyway, so that's a wash. And not to mention depreciation and maintenance. Maintenance, you need to budget. Boaters need to budget for $100 to $150 a month for maintenance. It's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer.
It really is.
So how would somebody go about contacting you and setting up to have a membership?
Sure. Probably the easiest way is to go to freedomboatclub.com. freedomboatclub.com, and then you could scroll all the way to the bottom, and you're going to see all 130 franchise locations. We're real simple because Washington W's at the end of the list. So it's Washington, Seattle. You can see the fleet. You can see the boats. You can see the brand new Glastron that we've purchased, and it's on the way. You can see the boats that are in the fleet now, and you can learn more about the club. If anyone wants immediate information, they can call or text me at 206-900-1291. That's 206-900-1291. But again, freedomboatclub.com.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very interesting idea. Very fascinating.
Thank
For
you,
somebody
Mike.
that likes boating, it seems like a reasonable way to go.
It is.
The best way to go.
It is.
So anyway, do follow up. Do give a call. Do check out the website. And do join the Freedom Boat Club. Anyway, I want to come back. I started talking about the supercycle and what these countries are that are beginning to grow much faster than the U.S. and which are driving the supercycle. And it's not enough just to say that these countries exist, because they've gone through a couple difficult years. through the last 3 years, those emerging nations have gone through very difficult times. There was a credit crunch that came along that caught them. Many of the countries have commodity cycles. They were caught with that. It's been a slow thing, and people have kind of backed away. But what's going on in those countries is this. People are emerging from poverty into the middle class. I had a client once who's now gone, but he was with American Standard at the time. He was moved or transferred to China to start to make toilets and showers and bathtubs, ceramic toilets and bathtubs and showers. And he said the first problem they had was with this workforce that was coming in. They had a workforce that had never seen a toilet before, that had a workforce that had never seen a bathtub or a shower. They had to show them what product they were making and how to use it. That was in China, in Tianjin, China. Not that many years ago, few decades ago, but that's where they were, and that's where that country was. Today, those people have emerged from that subsistence existence into the middle class because they begin to have wages and they're beginning to buy things. And when you look at what's happened, the trajectory follows the poverty curve. As poverty goes down, the purchasing is increasing, and you're adding people to the purchasing of goods and services. That's what's going on. You know, it's all about the math. It's the world income. It's the growth of the middle class. The projections are that by 2030, 93% of the world's middle class will live in those emerging nations. Think about that. 93% of the world's middle class will live in those emerging nations. Now, middle class has a broad spectrum. As you have a big middle class in the U.S., you have a broad spectrum of middle class in the worldwide. Doesn't mean that they're all millionaires. It means that they're beginning to consume and moving away from subsistence to consumption. That's a significant level. And we're going to come back and talk about that after the commercial break. Because that's what's driving the economy. And that's going to give opportunities for investments if you're in the right place. We'll be right back after the commercial, and we'll be talking about that. Don't go away.
Stay tuned. How About Money returns in a moment with Mike Adams here on Business Radio 1300 KKOL. For more information, click on AdamsFinancialConcepts.com.
How do you picture retirement? House on the beach, small farm in the country, traveling the world with your spouse. The one thing you don't picture is running out of money. Retirement dreams are shattered all too often by poor investment choices, sending many retirees back to work. If you think the job market is tough now, try entering it after you've retired. Don't run out of money. Start planning now. Call Mike Adams of Adams Financial Concepts today at 206-903-1019 and learn more about how you can create wealth for retirement and probably, most importantly, protect yourself from running out of money. Adams Financial Concepts specializes in creating and maintaining wealth. Call today, 206-903-1019 or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com.
Off the phone. About Money continues. Remember the website adamsfinancialconcepts.com. Here's Mike.
So I've been talking about the super cycle and talking about this phase 3 that began in 2009 and is driving the economy, the world economy, at a faster than average rate. And what drives that has been the emerging nations. And I think I'm trying to think of the right word to say, instructive to think about what happens with poverty. If you go back to 1820, 94% of the world's population, including the US, 94% of the world's population was living in poverty. I was in Boston a few weeks ago, and we went to visit John Adams' home. John Adams, John Quincy Adams, there were 4 generations of Adams that lived in these homes. And John Adams' father was a preacher, but he also, for income, made shoes. And they were living in poverty. The average wage, the average income in today's dollars, this is not dollars then, today's dollar in 1820 was $228 per year. That's less than $20 a month. Think of what it would be to try to live on $20 a month in today's world. You'd be raising your own food. You'd be living on a very, very subsistence level. Life expectancy was only 37 years. And most of the people lived on farms or had gardens because you had to raise your own food. You had no choice. Less than $20 a month. By 1870, the beginning of the first supercycle, 87% of the world were living in poverty. We'd gone from 94 to 87. Half the population in the U.S. lived on farms or lived within 25 cities that were less than 2,500 people. Income had risen to $292 in today's terms. So we're almost $25 a month. You know, shoes that were made by John Adams or by 1870 by the shoemakers then, they were handmade and they fit either foot, and there was one size fits all. Dinner consisted of something like chicken soup, chicken stew, dumplings, mashed potatoes, and biscuits and honey. There were no salads. There were very little fruit. It was a very subsistence kind of level. Life expectancy had gone from 37 years to 44, and people were affected by smallpox and cholera and TB, tuberculosis, yellow fever. Medical kits. Look at the medical kits from the 1870s. It was a black bag that had primarily saws and knives for amputation. That was most of what was carried in those black bags in those days. Not like syringes and some of the things that are carried today. Mostly saws and knives for amputation. By 1950, the rest of the world, 82%, was living in poverty. 1 in 5 people lived in rural times. 4 out of 5 were moving into cities. The labor in the U.S. had risen in today's dollars to $1,341 a month, almost $8 an hour. Think of the change that was happening in the U.S. From $290 just a few years before had risen to $8 an hour, or $292 a month, to $1,300 a month. The shoes had now become right and left. Factories were making shoes, and hand labor was beginning to disappear. The food was more varied, and life expectancy had gone from 44 to 53 years. We were moving from poverty to the middle class. People were buying shoes instead of making their own shoes. By 45, still 73% of the world lived in poverty. That's the beginning of the second supercycle. And by the big decline that began in 1960, the end of the supercycle, poverty had shrunk even more. Today, there's just over 20% of the world's population that still lives in poverty. Still a very, very large number, but it's shrinking at a very rapid rate. Think of the impact in America as we move from poverty into middle class time, into income coming. What that meant is people were buying. You know, I used the example of shoes. In those early days, you had shoes that were one size that fit either foot. That's all you did. And they were all handmade. And many people didn't have shoes at all. By 1950, 15, most people were buying shoes that were both right and left, that had a right and left foot, that had a dimension that fit their foot. Significant difference. That's happening now in the rest of the world. You know, if you look at China alone, 30 years ago, 260 million people lived below the poverty line. Today, less than 40 million. That's still a huge number, but it's declining very rapidly. What's happening in China is happening in India, is happening in the rest of the world. And as those people move into the middle class, they're beginning to buy clothes, they're beginning to buy food, they're beginning to buy lattes, they're beginning to buy automobiles, they're beginning to purchase things. You know, that means that that's driving the U.S., that's driving world economy. There was a large brokerage firm, Goldman Sachs, that came out and produced a report based on that a lot of people have taken very, very seriously. It was the BRIC, the identification, or they identified 4 countries which had great growth prospects: Russia, India, China, and Brazil. Brazil, Russia, India, and China, the BRIC countries. They said those were the countries which had the great growth prospects. And of course, we know Brazil's gone through their problems, Russia's gone through theirs, China and India have gone through their problems. You know, those countries have had more rapid GDP growth. But the problem is, the thesis is not supported by the actual numbers. What the numbers show is BRIC was based on very limited information. Credit Suisse recently completed a study where they showed, and they looked at 83 countries from 1972 to 2009, ranked by their GDP, and they found that investing in the highest growth countries averaged 18%, and in the lowest growth, 25%. There's a thing that about investments, you have to have exposure worldwide. But there's a way to do that without all the political and geographical risk. That's been our focus. That will continue to be a focus with U.S. companies that have great exposure overseas, but are controlled by U.S. domestic laws. It's coming. By 2030, 93% of the world's population will be in those emerging nations. It's something which will drive, along with the changes in the economy, which will drive investing. It's something that's coming. It's part of the super cycle. That's what the super cycle is all about. That's where you need to be. There's also tremendous growth within the U.S. And we lead at this time most of the nations in the world. They're catching up. They'll continue to catch up. But for now, a lot of the investments are here with companies that have overseas exposure as well. That's where we are. That's what the meaning is. That's the mile-high view of where we are. For the specifics, that's a whole different program. But that's for another day. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back next Friday, and we'll talk about some of the more specific areas. But until then, have a great weekend. Have a great week. And next week, we'll be talking about money.
You've been listening to About Money with Mike Adams, a registered investment advisor. If you'd like more information about what you heard today, or about Mike's investment philosophy and strategy, or if you want Mike to evaluate your own portfolio, click on AdamsFinancialConcepts.com. That's AdamsFinancialConcepts.com. The information shared on the preceding program was for educational purposes only, and any investment advice given may not be suitable for all investors. Join us again for more About Money with Mike Adams here on Business Radio 1300 KKOL.
The preceding program was sponsored by Adams Financial Concepts. Creating and maintaining wealth has been the specialty of Adams Financial Concepts for over 20 years. Every portfolio managed by Adams Financial Concepts is customized to fit each particular client's objectives and risk tolerance. The client's interest always comes first in portfolio decisions. Call Mike Adams today at 206-903-1019 or log on to adamsfinancialconcepts.com to check out their AFC performance. They welcome your review. That's adamsfinancialconcepts.com.